We're live, Chair.
Thank you very much. So good morning, everybody. We're here today for the Economies, Residents and Community Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Angela Davis and I'm the chair of this committee. We have some councillors and officers here with us today. So we'll commence the meeting. So if I could ask members of the committee, if you would like to speak, could you use the hands up function that's appeared there on the bottom of our screen? I'll just put mine up there. So hopefully you all know how to use that. So on to our agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have a few, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Arwell-Jones and Sarah Williams as members of the committee. Also from Cabinet members Jackie Charlton, David Thomas, Jake Berryman, Matthew Dorrance, and officers Emma Palmer and Clyde Pinney.
Thank you very much. So item 2, disclosures of interest. So this is to receive any disclosures of interest by members relating to items to be considered at the meeting. Does any of the members have any disclosures this morning? Okay, thank you very much. Declarations of party whips, to receive any disclosures of prohibited party whips which a member has been given in relation to the meeting in accordance with section 78.3 of the local government measure. Does anybody have any party whips they need to declare this morning? So I'm going to take a silence as a no, so thank you very much for that. And item 4 on the agenda this morning, we're looking at the minutes of the previous meetings. So I'm just checking that you all authorise me to sign the minutes of the previous meetings. Do we need a proposer and a seconder win for this, or just a general?
Proposer and seconder would be helpful, Chair.
Okay, so Councillor Carl, you wanted to speak?
Yes, I'm happy to propose that we accept those minutes as a true record of what transpired, Chair. Thank you. On both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For both. Thank you, Councillor Carl, Vice Chair. So that's the minutes from the 23rd of June, which was the discretionary cost of living support scheme, and the minutes from the 25th of July, the shared prosperity fund. So I've got a proposer. Have I got anybody to second those minutes? Councillor Jeremy and Councillor Jack Danny.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Okay. And thank you, Danny. Thank you. So item 5 on our agenda is the recommendations to Cabinet. So to receive and approve the recommendations for submission to the Cabinet, the first ones, we're on page 23 now of the full minute pack. And these are the recommendations of the Purchase of Private Properties Working Group, which met on the 22nd of the 3rd. So does anybody have any questions or comments on these minutes?
Okay. Just to formally introduce them, I suppose I was the officer leading at the time. This was obviously pre-election, and because of the election, we didn't have the opportunity to bring them back to committee until now. There were some concerns raised by previous members of the council in respect of a current member of the council who's currently a cabinet member in relation to the purchase of private properties by the council. The working group reviewed the policy, and as you can see from the outcomes here, the working group was content that the policy was fine and obviously constantly being updated. There were a few recommendations arising from the meeting of the working group itself, but it decided when we got to the end of this process that actually it didn't need to meet again, that the work was concluded, and this is the outcome, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I do note that there are 3 recommendations at the end of this paper. So do we assume they've been accepted, or do we just accept these minutes then as read?
They're for you to accept the recommendations and observations report, and then I'll forward them on to the Cabinet, Chair.
Okay, so do we have a proposer and a seconder for this, having read the paper? I'm certainly happy to accept them as chair. some advice there, Wyn, please.
If you're proposing, Chair, can somebody second?
I'm happy to propose or second, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Carl. Okay, so we're happy with that, Wyn?
That's fine, Chair.
Thank you very much. And the second paper, then we have to accept recommendations to Cabinet were from the meeting we had to, it was a virtual scrutiny of the information governance report. So this is pages 25 through to 28 of our pack. We had to get our comments in by the 10th of October. And this is the report with the recommendations of this committee. So there were a number of questions raised and those have been answered in this report pack. So are members of the committee minded to accept that, or do you have any further questions from these?
On this report, Chair, will go with the actual report itself to Cabinet because it hasn't gone to Cabinet as yet. So
No.
This is a pre-decision scrutiny. This will go to Cabinet and then again, we will get the responses back.
So I think if the committee are minded, I propose we accept this as a true report of our meeting, and then we will receive the comments back from Cabinet following the serving of this paper.
Yeah,
So
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. So just to let you all know, I'm not seeing the hands up function for some reason. That's not coming up on my screen. So don't know are you using that, but yeah, so you will have to let me know if you need to speak. If could I ask, oh, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Chris, that is working. Yes, that's coming up now. Thank you. I'm seeing those, and Danny, thank you. Excellent. Had a little bit of a panic there, thinking everything wasn't working correctly. Okay, so we'll move on with the agenda. We're now on item 7, which is feedback from the phosphates working group. But Chris, you've got your hand up. Would you like to speak?
If I could,
Yep,
just in relation to the report that we've just supported, if that's going to come back from Cabinet, will there be a further opportunity then to review the comments on there? Because obviously this was a new process that we've gone through. So it'd be just interesting to see whether we could do that and pick that up as a part of our learning processes for this committee.
But if I understand correctly, I'll just check this with Wyn. We will get this will go to Cabinet, and then they will fill in whether they've accepted or rejected our recommendations, and we will receive the feedback from them. So at that point, I would say yes, that we are open to be able to discuss it once again, Chris. And I think that was be a very good suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct, Chair. It gives you the opportunity to obviously quiz the portfolio holder and relevant officers about why they came to that determination in terms of the responses back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody happy with that? So in that case, we move on to item 7, which is feedback from the phosphates working group. And that's a subgroup of this committee to look into the phosphate situation across Powys. And we did hold a meeting on the 6th of October. It's just myself and Councillor Jeremy that are in the meeting today that are members of that phosphate working group. I don't know, Councillor Jeremy, would you be happy to bring the group up to date with what we discussed?
I can try and do so, yes. The group met on the 6th with Peter Morris, head of planning, to discuss the issue. The main part of the conversation, well, Peter updated us on the sort of seriousness of the issue and a lot of detail, but then the question arose as to what actually the purpose and power of the working group was, and the feeling was that as it stood at the moment, the working group didn't really have a very well defined purpose and power, and it would be better to be part, well, that a lot of the discussions were taking place in other forums, that where the council and Cabinet were engaging with other bodies, and that was really the proper forum for actions to be taken, and that it was better for this working group probably to be absorbed within a wider environmental working group that the council is likely to be setting up, that covers the nature emergency and the climate emergency, so that that phosphates would become part of the wider discussion about the nature emergency, and that would probably be a better forum for these discussions to happen. Is that sufficient, Angela?
I think you've summed up very succinctly there, and we are due to have another meeting as a working group, and we'll sort of come to a consensus of how we feel the best way forward to come out with some outcomes for some workable outcomes for the council. Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on that, or any comments of how you think the working group, or how you would like the working group to proceed, because it is a working group of this committee and it is answerable to this committee. So feel free to have some input in that. Any comments or questions? No, all quiet. So I think everybody's happy with that then, Jeremy. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so we don't have any other business on our agenda, but I just wonder if members of this committee have any other comments on any of the items we've discussed so far, or any other issue they'd like to raise at this point.
So you've gone past item 6, which is the second set of recommendations coming back from Cabinet to committee.
I beg your pardon. I'm very sorry. I was ticking away off my agenda there, and I can see, yes, I've missed that. So we'll go back to item 6. I apologise for everybody. So that's back to page 29 of the full reports pack. And this was the recommendations, scrutiny recommendations to Cabinet. And the first paper was on the discretionary cost of living support scheme, which met on the 5th of the 7th. So if you will scroll back a couple of pages and see if you have any comments you would like to make on those. So these our recommendations went to scrutiny, and we've got the scrutiny responses to the recommendations there. Does anybody have any questions or comments to make? All quiet. Councillor Carl, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. No, it was great to see that the Cabinet had taken on board some of the comments, especially around the comment I made about energy efficiencies and air source heat pumps. They have said there that they would come back and they're going to look at all options. I'd be interested to know what those options are going to be. In this week's County Times, Councillor has been criticised for in the viewers' letters for not installing solar panels on our properties, and yeah, it'd be good to know, that the current Cabinet are proactive and are looking at that. So that's great. That's really good news. Just like to make that point. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carl. Has anybody else got any comments? I mean, I'm looking down here now. The comments or recommendations were rejected, seem to be rejected on the basis of how the scheme was set up, that the council weren't able to do that. But as you say, Councillor Carr, they do seem to have accepted all our other comments, and that is a positive move, isn't it? So, Wyn, how would we be able to get the feedback that Councillor Carr would like? Is there a process in place for that?
We can make that request to officers and to the Cabinet member.
Okay, so is everybody happy if we move to do that? Nigel, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know Councillor Carr's comments, and if Wyn picks it up, we can certainly put that into report that will come to Cabinet in due course in terms of our investment plan. But I just thought it'd be helpful just to note that we're still awaiting confirmation from UK Government in terms of the fund going forward. So watch this space, really. I think probably linked to Chancellor's announcements. We were talking about autumn. I think that the discussion now is more autumn, sort of winter for decision from the civil service. So obviously we'll keep you posted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Okay, so any other questions or comments from the committee? No, thank you very much. So we'll move on then. The second paper of scrutiny recommendations was on the Shared Prosperity Fund, and these went to Cabinet on the 26th of July, and we're pages 33 to 35 of the agenda pack. Councillor David.
I just thought the detail can be answered by Diane, who's on the call, but just to make it clear to this scrutiny committee that we're still waiting for the answer on SBF from UK government. You'll be aware that UK government has not been exactly settled over the last few months, and it's difficult to get decisions. But as Nigel alluded to, in terms of when we might hear, we've obviously got a budget announcement next week, and one assumes that in the budget elements of investment like the Shared Prosperity Fund will come through. There's a lot of work been going on waiting for this to happen, but clearly there have been times over the last few weeks when I felt very negative about the whole thing, in that it might not go ahead. I'm not sure. I think Monday starts with a degree of optimism, and hopefully Diane Reynolds will share that with me. But thank you for the comments. They're taking on board, and the programme is being worked on as we speak, with the hope that UK government will give a yes. But of course, we will be midway through November with some of the money needing to be spent by March. So, and we'll have to be very nimble, which I'm sure we will be, in terms of getting some of the investment underway. And gladly answer other questions, and Diane will be able to answer the detail as well.
Thank you very much, David. Yeah, so it's all a little bit up in the air at the moment with the council's intentions are set out, and it's all depending on the money actually coming through then, just to clarify on that. Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Jeremy, you have a question.
Yeah, can I just sort of make the comment that I understand that a lot of the problems are because of lack of information from the Westminster government and so on, but the fact that there has been a complete sort of blackout of information over the last couple of months was slightly disconcerting from our point of view, in terms of I guess lack of transparency. So even if there was no news, it would have been good to have had updates explaining why there was no news, so that we actually knew that there was something going on in the background.
Apologies, Jeremy, if it felt like that. I suppose sometimes when you're in the middle of discussions, then you forget that others need to know all of that. But the answer would have been almost all the way through the process. I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. We're waiting. But except that perhaps we should have given more of those type of responses.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anybody else have any questions or comments to make on the Shared Prosperity Fund paper? Councillor Adrian.
Yes, thank you. Chair, could I just ask, I can't remember offhand, but the money that's allocated now, I think it's 2.7 million, which we don't know is going to come or not yet, I understand. Is that able to be rolled on into the next year, or does it have to be spent in that time scale? I can't remember from the meeting we had. Thank you.
And so I'm going to ask Diane Reynolds, who's working on the detail of this, to come in now, and perhaps Nigel, if I can see Nigel popping up on the screen as well, could answer some of the detailed questions, and the other questions that were asked about the split between capital and revenue are also subjects that Diane can take.
Diane.
Over to you, Diane.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. Yes, so the original information that we had from UK government clearly outlined that spend for each year had to be spent within each year. We have since met with UK government officials and asked the question, due to the delays in the launch of the fund and the clarification from UK government, would that messaging change in terms of could we roll some of year one's money over to year two? We don't have an answer to that. They haven't specified, the officials we were talking to haven't specified one way or the other, but they have taken that question back for us and we await clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Councillor Chris, you have a question.
Yes, Chair. It's just that thinking this through, if the Shared Prosperity Fund doesn't go ahead because of changes that happen centrally, what costs have already been incurred by this council, and would we be in a position to be able to claim any of that back? Because surely officer time just setting up all of the internal processes and structures would have had a cost element to it, and will that be able to go back to central government to be reclaimed?
My answer would be we'll ask, but I doubt if the answer will be yes. But there may be a better answer that Diane can give.
Yes, so we were given £40,000 to set up the and do the administration work for the Shared Prosperity Fund, which was joint between ourselves and Ceredigion. So we agreed with Ceredigion to split that between us, but we actually need a regional fund manager to set up what we're doing regionally. So we've both agreed to pool that funding to recruit a regional manager. For it's out for recruitment. Well, it has been out for recruitment. We're going through the interview process, etc. at the moment, hoping that the timing to accept someone in the position will go with the timing of the budget coming through. That funding was for the setup fee funding, but as you quite rightly point out, if the fund doesn't come through, it was probably cost us more than that 20,000 to have set everything up. And we could ask for fees, but I haven't seen that done in previous pieces, but I haven't seen funds withdrawn from such a high profile item either.
So we're in uncharted territory, really, I think is what you're saying, Diane. And it sounds that if the fund doesn't go ahead, there will be costs that the council will have to incur from the work that's taken place so far. What will happen, can I ask, with the individual that you're currently going through the recruitment process if the money doesn't come through to align with when you allocate the job?
I think we're hoping that we can offer the position on the day the budget goes through. So that's kind of how we're hoping the timing is. We have got that 40,000 to pay for that position. So we could recruit and then withdraw the offer, or we could recruit, try to tie up some of the loose ends and then end the position. We're really hopeful, though. I'm in Councillor David's positive Monday that the funding will come through, or some form of regional funding. I think something has to come through to replace the loss of European funding.
Okay, so is it fair we're operating on that optimistic line, saying, well, we'll carry on with the plans in the hope that the promised money, the promised fund will go ahead as planned at some point?
Yeah, everything we can do in the background, we're continuing to work at pace. We're just, as you know, we've got lots of documents and papers waiting to come through to Cabinet and yourselves. So we're still continuing on that basis.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else got any comments or questions they would like to ask Diane or Nigel or David? No, there we are. I think you've answered then, Diane. I think you've made it clear really that it's more unknown than known at this moment in time, but thank you very much for that. Okay, committee, so that's the Shared Prosperity Fund. If you have no further questions on that, I think we've come to the end of our agenda items. Does anybody have any other comment or question they'd like to raise on any of the issues we've discussed so far? Councillor Ian. You're on mute, I believe, Councillor Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I thought I'd press the button.
That's fine.
Just looking through the forward work plan, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of content regarding the development of our local economy. All I would ask the committee to do is consider that we do a structured review of sector by sector what's actually going on in our economy, how the current policies are directed to developing our local economy, and whether they're working.
Okay, well, that's very timely then, because that now takes us on to item 8 of the work programme. So going down here, so Wyn, I can see you've populated the work programme with some of the my mind has gone blank, the work I'm looking for, the sort of set pieces that we need to look at as a committee. Yes. So there, in that first meeting, we've got the Q2 performance data, performance, risk and finance, and that'll take up that whole meeting. Am I correct there?
I probably will, as you're dealing with 8 services, Chair, I suspect on that. Also then moving into 2023, there's some items early part of the year, again, you're into the Q2 reports are actually delayed, because obviously we've been looking at the budget recently, so that's why those are delayed to December. Beginning of next year, you're going to be looking at sections of the wellbeing assessment and what's come out of the wellbeing review, and how that then feeds into the new corporate improvement plan, as well as the Q3 risks. Then we're into budget scrutiny, and you've got 2 dates already set out, one for budget scrutiny, and basically all the scrutiny committees are meeting on, it's a very short time scale, it's probably about 2 days. We'll have morning and afternoon meetings of scrutiny committees to actually look at the budgets. We'll then put together recommendations of all the scrutiny committees to go to Cabinet. We've also got a second date provisionally booked there if required. For example, if the opposition groups decide to put together an alternative budget, that will need to be scrutinised. And again, we'll need to make comments to that. Then we're into the standard for the rest of the year. And so this is how it looks at this point in time. But obviously, we are having a discussion later on today about work programming and what items need to be put into the work programme. We've got a list of things we've already identified. I'll add this one from Councillor Ian to that list, and then we can have that discussion, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. So in the Q2 data, we'll have the pre-meeting there, because we have a number of new members of this committee, including myself. So these are going to be new papers in a format we've perhaps not seen before. So I think it's going to be important that we have that pre-meeting to go through and make sure that everybody understands what these papers are telling us or not telling us.
Absolutely, Chair. And I'm having a meeting with officers this week to look at, because obviously you had the initial training of all scrutiny members in terms of performance, risk and finance. We now need to do some detailed work with each specific committee, so you're ready to actually look at these and go through the papers that go to Cabinet, so you understand what the requirements are, what you need to be asking, etc. So that's part of the ongoing development of each committee, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. So Councillor Ian, so your suggestion there for the committee to be looking at the local economy, we can add that to the list of items in our work group, and when we have our meeting to discuss the work programming, we'll go through that in a bit more depth. Are you happy with that?
Yes, Chair. I mean, we might want to consider setting up a specific working group just to look at the different elements of our local economy anyway. It's going to be such a vast area. I just think we have to break it down into bite-sized chunks and have a very critical review of which policies are working and frankly which aren't. Excellent
suggestion, thank you, Councillor Ian. So does anybody else have any comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor David, I see your hand is up.
I was just going to respond briefly to Ian's suggestion, and obviously I have no problem whatsoever about a review. All I would point out is there's an awful lot of the economic issues that affect us, our Welsh Government plans and proposals, and I'm wondering whether the way of dealing with it is first of all with a member development session, which would brief all members about how the economy works. And I'm sitting here as a cabinet member saying that it is very complicated and complex about the interrelationship between Mid Wales Growth Deal, the Shared Prosperity Fund, which are two different government schemes, the Business Wales and their involvement in working on it. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't do the work, but to do it sector by sector, I think may be the wrong way round. We ought to. So if we perhaps started with a members development day, well, it's not a day, it might be a day session, so that we can understand and talk about the different issues that Powys faces as a county, and out of that then scrutiny may decide to home in on one particular area, for example tourism or agriculture, but to say that we'll be able to go through all of those in the next year, I think would be a challenge for the team, bearing in mind the work that they will be doing on Shared Prosperity Fund in particular.
Okay, well, that sounds like a really good suggestion to me, to have a member day to sort of give us the information required. Yeah, that would make sense. Would you agree with that then? Would you be happy with that, Ian?
Yes, that seems to be a reasonable way forward. I mean, one of the big issues that we really do need to try and understand, and it will come down to a sector by sector assessment, is the resilience of our local economy and the extent to which those different sectors have been railroaded by quite fundamental changes in what's happening at a UK and a Welsh government level, and then asking the question, well, should we be providing more support for those particular sectors? I don't know the answer to that question yet, but I'd certainly be very interested to see what the background is, and then the question then leads on to, is Powys County Council doing enough in terms of its economic development planning, for example?
If I could come back, Chair, just to say I don't worry about it or about the examination of it, but I think the process is, let's put a members development session on that explains our linkage with Welsh Government, UK Government, in terms of the economy. I mean, we can have a long discussion about what we mean by the economy. The economy is almost everything we do here in some way or other. So happy to start with that, and then make it easier for scrutiny to pick an area that we start on and see how that develops.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor David, would you take that forward to arrange that development day, or?
I'll take it away, talk to officers and to Wynne about how we could set that up.
Thank you very much. That'd be really useful. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, committee. Wynne, have we got anything else that we've need to discuss in this meeting now? Come to the end of our agenda. Sorry, Councillor Jeremy's just put his hand up. Councillor Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks. Can I raise a slightly broader sort of question that's partly maybe my ignorance of how the scrutiny function works? Does this scrutiny committee align with particular portfolios? The reason I ask is, for instance, I'm concerned about a lot of the issues that are under the climate portfolio. The title of the scrutiny committee doesn't actually include anything that would relate to climate change, but can I assume that everything under Jackie's portfolio would come under this scrutiny committee?
I think the easiest way that I explain it to people who ask me what my committee does is we basically do everything that isn't learning skills, education, or social services. So that covers the whole length and breadth of the work of the council, and hence why we don't have an individual portfolio holder. We have them all, because there's something about part of their responsibility that we cover. But I think Nigel probably could come in and fill us in better here.
I think it's a good summary of that, Chair. Yeah, it just to confirm, Councillor Jeremy, you certainly, Councillor Jack, all of Councillor Jackie's areas are picked up by this scrutiny committee.
but then sort of following on from that, then and the issues that I'm quite concerned about that we do keep scrutiny happening on is the climate emergency motion that was passed a couple of years ago now, and we've now had a nature emergency motion. Now, because the scrutiny committee only meets quite infrequently and the agenda gets filled up quite rapidly, it does mean that things like scrutiny of something like that may not be possible for sort of several months down the line. And things, I fear that because we focus on a few specific items in these meetings, it means that there is not very much scope for actually looking at a fairly broad spread and making sure we're picking up all of the things that we ought to be scrutinizing. Because, for instance, the climate emergency motion, I certainly feel over the last 2 years that progress on that has been excruciatingly slow, and we ought to have been sort of snapping at the heels of Cabinet to make sure that that happens rather faster. And I'm worried that the nature emergency will go the same way, that things won't happen very quickly on it. So what is I feel that there ought to be more scope for doing more in the scrutiny. Otherwise, it's a very slow process. It's from what I observed so far.
So if I could answer you there, obviously we would all be extremely surprised if the climate and nature emergency weren't your priority items, of course. But we have actually already mentioned in this meeting that the phosphate working group is probably, I think, and I don't want to preempt the committee's decision, but is probably going to morph into a climate and nature emergency scrutiny working group. And I think that'll be where the work that you are concerned about will probably take place. I can see David's got his hand up, so possibly you would like to come in there, David?
Just going to reflect on my 5 years on this scrutiny committee, followed by cabinet. The poach, what's the expression? The poacher term gamekeeper, or whatever the expression is. But what I would say is that the work in working groups is the vital piece. And I'm not going to start speaking for my colleagues, but I guess Jackie would welcome the input of scrutiny into this type in the same way as I do in the economic development area. And it's about setting up working groups that can work in a more nimble way than the whole committee can. And this committee just coordinates the work of those working groups. And that's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
Thanks, that's useful.
So I'm just flicking back through my notes, but I've got that many. We have actually set the date for the next working group, Jeremy. I think it's now in the next fortnight. So I think that's really where you need to be putting that pressure on there and ensuring that the terms of reference for that working group, again, look, I'm preempting an outcome of what the committee might decide, but I think we were very minded at the first working group meeting that this would be the way that we go, weren't we? I think there'll be no surprise there. So I think it is likely that that phosphate working group will become a climate and nature emergency working group, and then we have got to think long and hard about how we set the terms of reference for that group to ensure that it fulfills the purpose that is really important to you and to many across Powys. So I don't know if any other members of our group here have any comments, but Wynn's got his hand up there.
Yes, Chair, just to say yes, absolutely. And it may be that my understanding from council was that it was going to be a sort of all-party, all-group working group. So it may be bigger even than this committee, to be honest with you, in terms of what gets established in terms of nature and climate emergency eventually. We'll see what comes out of that one. Certainly in terms of working groups, yes, it's a good way forward. I've got to reiterate, obviously, the issue of capacity within my team to deal with everything, because we are getting same demands from all the committees, and it's about dealing with it all. And the other one that we've got to accept is we cannot do everything. So we need to pick on what we can deal with. Yes, there are, I'll come back to priorities in terms of the big items. I'm sure Jeremy and a lot of other members would say, this is the big item. And, accept that totally, but it's okay, if that's the case, what else gives then in terms of what we don't do? And this is the discussion we need to be having, so we get a picture and can try and do as much as we can. And some of the other things we may have to look at in terms of, are we doing them as often, or shouldn't we be doing them as often as we are doing? These are the sort of discussions we need to be having with you as a committee.
Does that answer your question as much as it can for the moment, Jeremy?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I think here in today, we've had a very good example of that, in that, Councillor Ian, wasn't it, wants us to go into depth into discussing the local economy, and that is really important. And then somebody else, there are so many topics, and the work of the council is so broad. There are more topics than there are days in the week, and certainly not enough councillors and officers to look into everything. And I think this is why for the working groups, it's going to be absolutely essential that we really pin down the aims and ambitions of our working groups, because it'd be so easy for us to go down rabbit holes and disappear off on tangents. And we'll need to keep those groups very slick to have meaningful outcomes and recommendations for the council. So I think that's going to be a challenge for us all moving forward, isn't it? So has anybody got any further questions or comments they'd like to make at this stage? No? Okay, then Wynne, back to you. We've come to the end of our agenda. Is there anything else we need to be doing today before we close this meeting?
Not in public, Chair, no. So what I'll do is that if members are happy for you to end the meeting, I'll stop the recording, and then
just thank everybody for coming. If we've got any guests or observers, so thank you all for coming. And yeah, we'll close the meeting officially then. Thank you.
There we are. Thank you, Chair. And I'll stop the recording and end the public meeting.